See none? Yep.
I just made it.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? All right. Any public comments, Mr. Crum?
No, sir. No public comments received in advance of the meeting. Would anybody in the audience like to address the commission today? Seeing none, back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mr. Crum, for Executive Director report.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to go a little different approach with my executive director's report today. Some of you may know, or some of you may have seen some photos of Ms. Sheila Wilson as you made your way into the meeting room today. Sheila is retiring from the PDC and TPO after 23 years of service. And since 2018, Sheila has been our chief financial officer for our organization. I was kidding with Sheila. Some of you heard me speak at the TPO meeting. Sheila provides staff support to so many different organizations that she and I have done this goodbye 6 times now. And they're getting sad. So this one is not going to be sad. We're going to take this in a little different direction. So I could talk about the great financial support Sheila's provided to the TPO, the PDC, the Southside Network Authority as our broadband authority, Harumfa, or even HRTAC. I could talk about the great retirement dinner we had Thursday evening where about 80 to 100 people showed up to honor Sheila, and they were her friends and family. And I was so moved by how much she's touched so many people. But you all know pretty significantly, because every time we stand up with our audit, what do we hear, Mr. Treasurer? We hear a clean audit, don't we? Clean audit. And since I appointed Sheila as our chief financial officer in 2018, she has delivered a clean audit for all 5 of those organizations every year. Very directly, Sheila understands what it means to be a public employee, and Sheila understands what it means to be stewards of the public's money. And I'm very proud that you all could have confidence that those dollars were being managed by Sheila Wilson, and she's always done a great job with that. But there's some things you don't know about Sheila, right? You saw some photos as you came into the room. Apparently she went through a disco phase. When she was 8, I think she cut her own bangs before she got a photo. That photo's up there. So I know that's the one that really terrifies her. But what you might not know about Sheila is she's pretty active. I see Katie Colfer in the back, right? Sheila is really good about rounding up the team and saying, you know what, let's go over to the conference room and let's spend 10 minutes and let's walk the rounds, right? So you'll come over here and she'll be in here. They'll be walking around the meeting room just to get some steps in, to get a little exercise, to support one another and get rid of some of the stress. So Sheila, since you're going to retire now, being active is going to be super important. So why don't you come on up here a second, okay? And I told you I was not going to make, I know I cry every time. We're not going to cry this time. We're going to laugh a little, okay? Well, so, if you talk to my wife, I am not a good shopper, right? So, but I'm thinking, okay, let's go take a look. And Chris and I were looking at what could we buy Sheila. And Sheila, I didn't know that Sheila Wilson had her own sporting goods company, right? So we found this great Wilson basketball that our entire staff wrote a little message on for you, Sheila. So that's the first thing that we wanted to give you, right? Now we expect you to work on your free throw shooting. But I know you might want to get into tennis as well, and Sheila has her own tailored Wilson baseball. So when you go out walking, Sheila, you might want to wear that. Go ahead, put your hat on, okay? And then we do have some headbands, and I'm sorry they ended up in the other box there. But Sheila, why don't you tell everybody where you went to school, where you went to college?
Norfolk State.
Yeah. So I think it goes something like, how does that go? Behold.
The green and the gold.
So we hope that you're going to wear these when you go out for your morning walk, Sheila.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Sheila, before we do some photos with some outgoing commission members, anything you'd like to say to the commission, Sheila?
Thank y'all so much. Thank you. Like I said earlier today, it has been a pleasure working for the PDC. I came to the PDC from HRT, where I had worked there 13 years. And like I said earlier, I thought by coming here, being a small organization, it was just going to be a breeze. But once I got here, I'm realizing they have so many different areas that they're covering and so many different projects that it was just totally different. And I really had to kind of try my best to stay on top of my game, but it has been a pleasure. I want to thank Bob for thinking that I was capable of becoming the CFO. I really appreciate that. I'm starting to get teary eyed, y'all. But anyway, thank y'all. And also, I want to, of course, always recognize my team that worked with me because my success was because of the finance team that I work with. And I'm sure Teelan, which is going to be the new CFO, is the new CFO, is going to do a wonderful job. Thank y'all again.
All right, so what I thought might be nice, of course, Chair Pons, if you wouldn't mind coming up, Vice Chair Glover, if you wouldn't mind coming up for a photo with Sheila. I also want to recognize some outgoing commission members. If they happen to be here, would you mind coming on up to be in our photo as well? So we're going to have some people join you. 1 second, Matt. Not yet. Not yet. So Mayor Donnie Tuck, this is your last regional meeting, sir. Some of these folks were not able to make it, but of course we have Norfolk Council Member Danica Royster, Norfolk Council Member Andrea McClellan, Poquoson Mayor Gordon Helsel, Virginia Beach Council Member Chris Taylor, Virginia Beach Council Member Sabrina Wooten. I don't believe any of them were able to make today, but Matt, why don't we go ahead? Thanks, Matt. Go ahead and Sheila, don't forget to hold that basketball. Yes.
When the parking lot is complete, makeover, will there be a hoop rope in the corner for her to?
Yes. Yeah, I think maybe what we can do is we can start our first regional free throw shooting competition. And Greg Grittendorf is a man before his time. He's been telling me for years, Bob, we need a basketball hoop in the parking lot, right? So that's why you had him smiling. Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to quickly include a couple other items. Sheila beat me to it, but Teelan Hansen, please, if you wouldn't mind standing. Teelan comes to us from Old Dominion University. Prior to that, she was 9 years running the finance department over at the city of Suffolk. And prior to that, she was with the city of Norfolk. Teelan is going to be your next chief financial officer. We are super pleased that we were able to bring her over from Old Dominion University. Sheila, thank you. Sheila and Teelan have been working together the last month to ensure a smooth transition. So please welcome Teelan to our team. And I also wanted to recognize Teresa Johnson. Teresa comes to us, as you all know. Simone is expecting her family's first baby over the holidays. And Teresa's going to be stepping in for Simone. Teresa's done a great job already. She has extensive administration experience, human resource experience, and is already a great part of the team. So welcome, Teresa. And then I'm going to step aside from the podium. Sarah Kidd has a few items to share with you that I think you will find of interest. So you know Sarah runs our Geographic Information System Department. If there, as we say, if you see a great map in Hampton Roads, Sarah did it, right? So.
Welcome, Ms. Kidd.
Okay, yeah, we got a couple of slides there. So good afternoon. So I am here to briefly talk about a couple of awards that staff has been fortunate to receive in the last month. So first, a team of 5 PDC and TPO staff recently participated in the 3rd annual Hampton Roads Datathon, which is sponsored by Civic Lab Norfolk. And you can see there's our team photo there. The Datathon is a 1-week challenge for teams to develop innovative solutions to issues that relate to the theme of the event using data in some way. So this year's theme was infrastructure, and our project was called Shady Stops. And we analyzed all of the bus stops in Hampton Roads to discover how much tree canopy coverage each stop has and compared that to data about urban heat island severity. So this project earned 1st place and the coveted championship belt, which is, there's also a photo there, and it's now back in our lobby if you haven't had a chance to see that yet. We did win this in the 1st year that they held it, so the belt is now back in the regional building. And next, we have the Fish Swim Play website, which won the Best Web Application Award in the professional category at the Virginia GIS Conference, which was just held a couple weeks ago at the Kings Mill Resort. This conference is sponsored by the VAMLS organization. So you may recall I've talked about Fish Swim Play in the past. This is a resource for finding recreational sites in Hampton Roads. And this was initially developed as part of a Coastal Zone program grant several years ago. But this is the latest version, which we updated the inventory of the recreation sites and the mapping technology that's behind the scenes. So this slide is just showing a postcard that we put together that is shared at some of our public outreach events. So to wrap up, I'll just say that GIS and data analysis are an integral part of what we do at this organization, and we are proud to be recognized for these efforts. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for all the hard work that staff does, and glad to see that we were recognized.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a request, and now may not be the appropriate time, but as a lame duck member of this board, I think the last time we actually had a meeting on the peninsula might have been pre-COVID. So I just want to put that out there for consideration that perhaps we could try and arrange one of these meetings on the peninsula side.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
As far as reaching community of the organization, I support that. Okay, takes us to item 5, which is a report from Community Advisory Committee. Mr. Trotsky, excuse me.
Good afternoon. The Community Advisory Committee has not met since my last report. We have a meeting coming up, our final meeting of the year on December 14th. Happy holidays.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, item 6. Mr. Crum, anything set up there?
No, sir. Our consent agenda items A through and including E are presented for the commission's consideration and approval today.
Any questions? If not, if there's a motion.
So moved.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so now we're moving on to establish the nominating committee. Next on the agenda, we have, we're going to establish a nominating committee. Our annual meeting will be in January, and since Sheila's had her last meeting, this will be my last meeting as well. So with that, in the report, you can see there's a list of folks that we've asked to serve on the nominating committee. Anything to add there, Mr. Crum?
No, just that obviously Mayor Glover is your vice chair and has expressed interest in taking on the role as chair. If that were to be the wishes of the nominating committee, that would open up a vice chair position that should be from the peninsula, following with our longstanding policy. We also, in January, will need to elect or appoint a new HRPDC treasurer. If you don't mind, sir, this might be a good time. I know all the chief administrative officers know but Mr. Keaton, the Isle of Wight County Administrator, will be retiring this summer. So I know he looks forward. Next summer, yeah. So I know he looks forward to that. So we will be also need to appoint a new treasurer for the HRPDC.
So they'll meet over.
Yes, we will be calling that meeting virtually. We'll make it as easy as possible and bring forward a nomination for January.
Good. Well, I appreciate everyone's service on that and look forward to seeing what comes out of that and wish you the best of luck. Okay, item 8, resilient design standards. Do you want to introduce Mr. McFarland?
Yes, Ben McFarland, all know, is our Chief Resiliency Officer. Ben, Whitney, and the Coastal Resiliency team have been doing a lot of work over the years that really brings this proposal forward today. Ben's going to be presenting to you resilient design standards. Your staffs have been very involved in providing input to shape this proposal. So Ben, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Bob. All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Really happy to be here to try to wrap up this effort, or at least the first version of this effort. We've been working on this for a number of years with the Coastal Resiliency Committee, other stakeholders from around the region, nonprofit, private sector, and others that are interested in moving forward on how the region addresses our climate challenges in the coming decades. So what we're presenting on today are the final kind of first version of our regional resilient design guidelines for Hampton roads that are relevant for stormwater management. So I think this is where we're starting from with this conversation in thinking about design standards and why we have design standards to begin with, that they are fundamentally about protecting public health, safety, and welfare. They are standards that we assign based on our interpretation of risk, our tolerance for how much we are willing to risk things happening, balance that with the cost of actually implementing these practices. Design standards are they're part of the risk reduction pyramid. Start out with our initial risk of whatever the hazard might be. In this case, we're talking about flooding. There are different things that we can do to reduce that risk. We can build protective structures. We can try to reduce the amount of flooding that happens to, at the very beginning. Adopt standards for drainage and other facilities that control the water that does fall. Put in place development regulations, zoning, other land use controls. Purchase flood insurance, all these things that we can do at the national, at the state, at the regional, at the local level, at the individual level to buy down that risk to the point where we have some amount of tolerable residual risk. But the challenge that we're facing right now is that with more increasing rainfall, with sea level rise, that we are seeing flooding happening in areas that it hasn't happened previously, or it's happening more frequently in areas where it used to happen on rare occasions. So this is actually a picture. It's from last week. This kind of event is starting to happen more and more frequently in our region. Our infrastructure is not really keeping up with that. And so this effort has been about trying to come up with the new standards that our localities can adopt at their discretion to make sure that the infrastructure that's being built today is prepared, is being designed for the conditions, not only for what we're seeing right now, but also for the conditions that we think that we're going to be seeing in the future, right? So we know, like, one-off events, you might think that it's a rare occasion, or this is a bad day, but it hasn't always been that way. And this chart here comes from data from NOAA, just shows the frequency of high tide flooding in the region, taken from the Sewell's Point tide gauge in Norfolk over the entire record of that gauge. So that's from the late 1920s. All the way to the present day. And you can just see, like, it's getting worse, right? We're seeing more and more days with high tide flooding. But with sea level rise, it's just going to get even more, challenging moving forward. And I know this graphic looks very stark to see kind of that frequency, that increasing frequency in high tide flooding as a result of sea level rise. The threshold here for this gauge is 1.7 feet above mean higher high water. Our regional projections for sea level rise have 3 feet of sea level rise by 2080. And this chart goes all the way out to 2100. And so, if our infrastructure isn't designed to take these matters into account, then we're going to be seeing more flooding in more places more often as we go. As so, it will outlast certainly all of our lifetimes. But this is the problem that we really need to be thinking about today, because that infrastructure that we build, that we design, is going to be around for a long time, right? And so, in order to make sound public investments, we need to make sure that the designs that we're using are built for what the conditions are going to be like towards the end of the useful lifespan of those facilities. And so, a changing climate requires resilient design, right? We're seeing increases in sea level. We're seeing more intense rainfall, more rainfall overall. We're also seeing, that in order to actually make sure that what we're doing, that what we're building today, to maintain the level of protection that our residents, that our citizens here are accustomed to from our public infrastructure, that we adopt design standards that will maintain that level of protection, right? The 10-year storm, if we're designing for the 10-year storm, we need to be using the actual 10-year storm and not the 10-year storm that's based on old data. But we're hopeful that by providing this information through these design guidelines, that this will give a tool to your staffs, to your localities, to others around the region, individual property owners, but also private sector, that they can look at these projections, that these numbers that we put together, and be able to inform their own decisions, right, at all different scales about how they can implement resilient design across the region. And so, from a principal space, we're looking at trying to make sure that what we're putting together here is based on science. We are always looking at kind of what's coming out from the federal agencies, from the research universities. We have strong partnerships with Old Dominion University, with the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, with NOAA, with NASA, with the Department of Defense. We work with all of these partners at the state level as well. We've been very much working with DCR as part of the state's coastal resilience master planning efforts, to make sure that the information that we're using is the best available information, that it's up to date, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in detail here in a moment. Our goal is for these guidelines to be appropriate to the standards, to the decisions that are being made. And I have a little bit more about that in coming up, but the idea is that different things require different standards. And I think we have that is certainly incorporated into our public policies to some degree, but want to make that explicit that we're not suggesting a one size fits all approach, a one number, one scenario for every decision making process. But also, it's important that these guidelines be implementable, right? That they be based on what is affordable, that what our localities can do right now. And I think that's going to be a little bit different for each locality that considers these guidelines, or for any non-governmental actor that is using these, that they're going to have to make a decision on their own about the most appropriate or the best that they can do when it comes to incorporating resilience, but also keeping in mind that these things do have a cost. In terms of the guidelines themselves, we have a section that talks about how this is what are these meant to be, right? These are recommendations, not requirements. It should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that at the HRPDC, we can't make you do anything. But our job here, and working with your staff, is to come up with the information and provide the technical assistance that enables you all to make more informed decisions. We have a section that talks about how you would actually incorporate this into your decision-making processes, that looks at criticality and lifespan of projects. And then sections that talk about the projections that we're seeing in terms of rainfall and sea level rise, and also applications for those that use those projections for specific public policies related to stormwater management. And so this is just an outline of what we have. I think the bulk of the work is in that last section, the appendices and reference tables, that we're hopeful that you all will be able to just kind of plug and play into your local policies, or reference as part of your adopted local policies. So I mentioned that we have projections and applications. We try to go and find the available data. We look at the observed data from the past, the record that we have for both rainfall and for sea level trends. We look at near-term projections, or what's been going on more recently, and then forecast out kind of what we think we're going to be seeing as a result of projected climate change impacts. We think about sea level rise. I think many of you have probably seen a chart like this, certainly in talks that I've given up here, but also throughout the region. This is just the NOAA record from the Sewell's Point tide gauge. clear linear trend over the last almost 100 years that this has been actually tracking sea level. We're very fortunate to have this record. One of the downfalls, the pitfalls of having a very long record is that more recent changes to the linear trend can be kind of disguised behind the long-term linear trend. And so this chart here is actually coming from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, shows if we adjust the record to start in 1969, what the scientists at VIMS have found is that starting in the 1980s, there's a detectable acceleration of sea level rise, and so instead of it being more of a linear trend. And so this chart here is showing, just projecting out that accelerated rate to 2050, gets us to about 1.5 feet of sea level rise, which happens to be also what our planning scenario is that this board adopted back in 2018. And then we're also looking even further out when we think about long-term planning for sea level rise. And these curves here are updated. They're based on the 2022 NOAA report. The policy that was adopted in 2018 used the 2017 NOAA report. So we went back in and looked at the updated curves that NOAA and other federal agencies have put together. And the three sea level rise scenarios that we recommended back in 2018 are still pretty valid. They're still robust. They still fit across multiple curves that are that the national agencies are providing. So that's 1.5 feet between 2020 and 2050, 3 feet between 2050 and 2080, and 4.5 feet between 2080 and 2100. We think about rainfall. Apologize for the scale here because it's kind of hard to see what I'm going to be talking about. But the darker squiggly line there, that's the record from the Norfolk International Airport of annual precipitation between 1946 and 2000. That's the record that is currently used for that gauge in NOAA's Atlas 14. That's the precipitation atlas that NOAA has put together for our state and for others. That's the record that it's based on, right? So it doesn't include anything more recent than that. You can see there's a light, or it's a dotted blue line along that squiggly line that shows a significant but small increase or linear trend that shows an increase in annual precipitation over that period of time. But when we factor in more recent data, so the lighter blue there is showing data between 2000 and 2023, that increase, that linear trend actually shows a more significant increase over time. So the record that we are using right now, that all of your ordinances are pointing to, with the exception of Virginia Beach, is based on that older data set that doesn't really show the full picture of what's happening. So we do have a project that's underway right now that I'm going to highlight a little bit later on, that's going to update this standard. But the point being here is that we're really referencing this older information that's not really showing us even what's happening today, and certainly isn't showing us what's going to be happening in the near future. And so this is information from the National Climate Assessment that shows trends at the larger regional scale, multi-state scale, that show that rainfall, not only are we seeing more rainfall, but it's getting more intense. And then if we factor in climate projections based again on the National Climate Assessment and other tools out there, we know that, or we're forecasting or projecting that rainfall is going to increase overall. And this is just an example from a tool put together by the Mid-Atlantic Regional Integrated Sciences Assessment and the RAND Corporation for the Chesapeake Bay program that produced updated intensity, duration, frequency curves for the entire Chesapeake Bay watershed, as well as all of Virginia, to really give us a tool that we can use at the local level to factor in future rainfall expectations in our current planning decisions. So similar as our sea level rise curves, we have updated for precipitation projections as well that take into account what our rainfall is going to look like in the future. And so what that looks like when it comes to our recommendation here is that, and the methodology is detailed in the guidelines that were included with the agenda packet. But what we're recommending is between a 10% and a 20% increase, depending on the actual projections from climate, but also based on the amount of impervious cover. The more impervious cover you have in your community, the less capacity your land has to actually absorb rainfall. And so in areas where there's more trees, more grass, more vegetation, that it's less of a risk if we understate how much rainfall we're going to be seeing. But for communities that are more built out, underestimating carries with it a greater amount of risk of being on the wrong side of that curve instead of being on the upper side. And so that's one part of of how we kind of differentiated between the different communities in Hampton Roads. In terms of specific applications, we have tailwater elevation. So tailwater, that's the amount of water at the end of the pipe. You have a pipe that drains to a tidal body of water. It's kind of important to know what the tide's going to be looking like when we're planning for the design of that facility. Right now, the design standard in place is there's a default for 0.8 times the diameter of the pipe, or to just use mean high water. That's obviously with sea level rise. That's probably not the best idea. You know, we're already seeing increased sea level rise. We've seen several inches of sea level rise, probably I think about 9 inches since 1992, which is the start of or that's the year that we use for the established datums that NOAA puts out. This tool here provides individual watershed-based projections with sea level rise for all communities in Hampton Roads, for all HUC 12 watersheds that drain to tidal bodies of water. We were also put together using that Marissa and Rand tool that I mentioned. These are projections for every community. So we do kind of dive into the weeds a little bit on this, but that 10%, 15%, or 20% recommended increase is part of these tables that are provided in one of the appendices. And then one other thing that we're recommending as part of these design guidelines is for localities to consider both rainfall and tidal conditions at the same time. So right now, it's not, there's usually the default storm is to include, it's either the 10-year tide and the 1-year rain, or the 1-year tide and the 10-year rainfall event. We're putting this out there. This is based on some work that's come out of Virginia Beach as well, to suggest that for different types of storm events, we should have different pairs of rainfall and tidal events, and that those should also incorporate sea level trends. I mentioned before that one of the goals, one of the ideas behind this is that we need to have different standards for different types of projects. And when we're talking about climate projections for rainfall and sea level rise, that take into account the projected lifespan of a project is critical. Means that, if we don't want to use the same long-term standard for a short-term project, nor do we want to recommend using a short-term projection for sea level rise for something that's going to be around for 100 or 150 years, right? We don't need the same standard for a wet pond as we would for the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. And so taking that into account, actually having specific categories of projects that correlate with different projected lifespans is something that we have included in here as well. And the same with project criticality. Some facilities are just more important than others, and it might be wise. We have this some localities already have these types of policies in their floodplain management ordinances. But the idea here is that we want to build to a higher design storm for certain facilities that have a critical function, whether they are hospitals, emergency operations centers, evacuation routes, but that other projects, other things that maybe are not as important, don't necessarily need to be built to the same high standard. And again, we're trying to suggest here is that cost is an important factor in all these things. And so it's important for us to have policies that balance the benefits that we're going to achieve by having more resilient design with the cost of implementing those higher standards. So again, here we recognize that this is going to be more expensive. We are in a climate and a environmental regime right now where things are getting more expensive, whether we want to pay for it in terms of money, or we pay for it in inconvenience or increased risk. We're seeing more frequent flooding. We anticipate that that's going to only get worse in the future. A lot of efforts underway at the local and regional and state levels to address those increasing risks. But design standards are an important part of those discussions. We recognize that these are going to be more expensive to implement. But if we don't adopt higher standards, we're actually increasing the risk that our communities have in terms of feeling the impacts of flooding. So either way, there is a cost. It's just money or risk. Just a few things I'll close out with here. One, I mentioned we have the NOAA Precipitation Atlas 14. There is an update underway right now that's being funded through the Federal Highway Pooled Transportation Fund. So that's a multi-state project that's underway right now. We anticipate that will wrap up in late 2025 or early 2026. That will update the Atlas 14 project or product to account for more recent observations. The Atlas 15 project is underway right now at NOAA. That's going to be a new tool that's going to include not just kind of current rainfall projects or design storms, but also future design storms that account for climate change impacts. There are a few flood insurance rate map updates currently underway in the region in the western part. So Suffolk, Isle of Wight County, Southampton County, and Franklin are all receiving preliminary flood maps if they haven't already. And those we anticipate those being finalized next year. And then when we think about combined risk, we do have some new information available that we're reviewing from the state as part of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan that looks at rainfall flooding. And so looks at kind of what heavy rainfall will do on the land in terms of creating flood zones. Most of our flood maps right now are based only on either riverine flooding or coastal flooding, so they don't really account for rainfall. Just actually landing on the ground, and so that's going to be a new tool that will be made available to you and your staffs to use for your own work at the local level. And then there are 2 projects underway in the region, Corps of Engineers Coastal Storm Risk Management Studies, one in Virginia Beach, and then also one on the peninsula. So we are paying attention to those. Your staffs are also very engaged in those processes. So we're really excited to see how those play out, and we're trying to make sure that what comes out of those studies are actions and recommendations that will benefit the region moving forward. So what we're recommending here is that the board adopt a resolution encouraging localities to incorporate these design standards for sea level rise scenarios, tailwater elevations that incorporate sea level rise, future precipitation levels, and joint tidal rainfall design storms as part of your local plans and policies. Thank you very much. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Certainly a great deal of information there, and appreciate that the staff was able to put that together for consideration today. And certainly our communities are better for having it. I don't believe we have a quorum though, do we?
So, Mr. Chairman, staff informs me that we are 1 short in terms of qualified members for a quorum. However, I would suggest that the commission discuss the information that Mr. McFarland's presented today. We would like to get action from the commission. Obviously, we can't do that today without a quorum, but we will be back the next meeting. So if there are any questions that you have for Ben, we really would want to know if there are any objections to any of the things that we have as we move forward to move this forward for final approval.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Dyer?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's an outstanding presentation, but it underscores a dilemma that we're all going to have in our cities. Especially Patrick Dehaney and I last week welcomed the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference, and it really underscored the need. We are in the middle of a nationally housing crisis, and especially an attainable, affordable housing crisis. And we also have a dilemma in Virginia Beach where our $567 million bond referendum to do the same projects right now costs $1 billion plus. And we're anticipating, I guess, billions of dollars in future, commitments going forward. But finding that balance between growth and development, not only with housing, but, industry and, things of that nature. In Virginia Beach, our tax rate was 15% commercial, 85 residential, and trying to move that more towards, commercial, to help pay the infrastructure bills. We're going to have to, generate new revenue streams and things of that nature. And I just want to, as we go forward, remember, and the idea is trying to find balance, where balance is going to be a very difficult challenge for us.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Ritter?
Thank you. Thank you for the report. And I think it's going to be interesting going forward with 17 localities with 17 different approaches, which is how it should be. But if you all have time or the inclination, Mayor Dyer brought up a good point. If localities feel they have to raise fees or taxes to approach these issues that need to be approached, one of the important things is communicating with the public exactly why. And I find even after all these years, the biggest sticking point is trying to explain the definition of a blank year storm. So when you call it 100-year storm, the public assumes, and I did for quite a while, it should only happen once every 100 years, but that's not the definition. So if y'all could find it in your group analysis, perhaps you can come up with a better way to describe rainfall intensity. That's all. It's just a suggestion, but if affected localities that really need that infusion of funding, they've got to be able to communicate that well to the public. And I think that's a sticking point. So just my 2 cents
Good.
worth.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Anybody else have any questions?
Again, thank you so much. But as was mentioned, the layman's language is important. And also you said we could either have the funds to make it happen or the risk. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the risk? Because that may be a wake-up call to the different groups.
Sure. I mean, I think when we talk about increasing risk from an event right now, and so I think, to the terminology point, usually we'll say something like the 1% annual chance event. It's a little hard to fit that on a slide compared to the 100-year storm, but I think certainly, Ms. Ritter, your point about clear terminology, that is something that we wrestle with in our work, and I know the locality staff that work on floodplain management, particularly in stormwater management as well, that's something that we do. It is challenging communicating that, and that's not just something that's unique to Hampton Roads. It's a nationwide language barrier that the professions are all kind of wrestling with. But I think in terms of the increased risk, it really depends on how far out we're looking. But things like seeing, what we think might be the 10% chance storm or the 10-year storm is actually more like the 5-year storm right now, or the 20% chance. And I think we can do some of the number crunching to have some specific examples of what that might be. And I think we're happy to try to incorporate some of that into the recommendations. And sounds like we'll have a couple of extra months to do some work and to put some more information in there. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, right? I think that slide that I showed, if you can, Mark, you can bring that up, please. That showed I'll flip to it real quick. This one here, right? So this is showing so that you can't even tell. I mean, so we can zoom into this, and actually, I think that would be for a great exhibit to have in the report. But at the bottom here, that's the same bar chart as was on this slide. This is a historical record, and it's the same numbers at the bottom here in blue that you can barely see because with sea level rise, that is going to happen much more frequently. So that's the kind of increasing risk that we're talking about. That something that today might be once every 3 or 4 years happening on the tidal cycle, will happen several times a year in 10 or 20 years, depending on what that specific threshold we're talking about is.
Ben, a couple things. The standards, will you be sending those to all of the community development departments in the localities around the region? So I think that'd be good to incorporate those in a lot of our comp plans as we're updating them.
Yes, so these have been shared and as draft. The tables that are here have been shared a few times with our Coastal Resiliency Committee and the other stakeholders around that. So that has staff from all the localities, but we'll certainly send that out to a wider audience.
Okay.
Yeah, once it's finalized.
Okay.
But they have been sent out prior.
And second thing, one of the items that I know we are all struggling with right now is wetland mitigation credits and the lack of wetland mitigation banks. And this might be a joint effort with maybe your department and Sarah, is to try to help identify. We just had recently a project in Isle of Wight that is converting some farmland to wetlands, and it was for a specific project. But right now, there are no wetland credits in the region, and primarily because SIPSA has, and some other large projects have taken up all the wetland credits. But there was a lot of marginal farmland that has been cleared over the years. And, if you're from a farming family, they always describe that as the low ground, which meant that it was probably wetlands when it was cleared. So that would be a great benefit for everyone if there could be some kind of mapping done to show potential areas that could be converted into wetland mitigation banks, because there's a lot of property out there that's very low. It was, obviously holds water. And I think that would be a big benefit for the whole region.
We'll take a look at it.
Mr. Chairman, and commission members, I know, and the CAOs would be better to speak to this than I, but I believe that what you're seeing with the local governments is your bond rating agencies, as they look at your bond ratings, are beginning to ask you about resiliency preparation, right? And I see a lot of nods, right? So that having these standards being available and having these standards as a cafeteria menu of options that you could all borrow from and utilize can be very helpful in terms of, Mayor, back to your borrowing power, right? As you fund these projects. I think you all came out of the transportation meeting where we talk about $5 billion of highway construction projects. The numbers for resiliency can be much, much higher. And obviously being able to get access to that money as cost effectively as possible is going to be important. But I'd just be, not to call out Mr. Roberts or Mr. Willer or others, but I just wonder if you could speak to that in terms of the bond rating agencies, and if they seem to be, are you noticing an increased focus on this?
I would, I'd place that at about 7 years ago. We started hearing questions from all three agencies on what the risk was to each of the individual areas of the city and what preparations we were making. I think they have started to build some specific criteria into their metric that they assign a credit worthiness, but it is an increased focus. And to your point, it ties to our ability to borrow money for other priorities.
Mr. Wheeler agreed to that.
I didn't need to belabor it, but absolutely. I think we're all seeing it. And if we haven't seen it yet, we'll see it the next time we meet with the bond rating agencies, I'm sure.
Okay, again, so we can't take action on this today, but I hope at our next meeting, we'll be prepared to support this.
So may I ask, as we queue this up for approval at the next meeting, are there any concerns that Ben should be aware of in terms of tweaks to what's been presented? If seeing none, we can have this ready on the next agenda for the commission's approval, sir.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Ben.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
My apologies, but I have to adjourn. We have a special meeting in Virginia Beach this afternoon I have to oversee. But if I could just say, make a comment, personal point of privilege, that we have a great group here, and I've been involved with this group for 20 years with some magnificent individuals. And I just want to say to my friend Donnie Tuck, how much you have meant to this organization. That perpetual smile, the voice of reason. Donnie and I got together with Bob Crum and we did the Mayor's Youth Task Force with the CAOs and everything. And Donnie, I just want to say what a privilege it has been. And our friendship will continue, but what you have brought to this organization, I just want to say thank you. God bless you, and just good luck in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. You're absolutely right. So we'll move on to item 9, which is Hampton Roads benchmarking study, and we're going to invite Nikki Johnson up.
So Nikki is your regional economist, and she will be presenting the regional benchmarking study, which is an annual analysis and publication that is put out by the Planning District Commission. And Nikki's going to touch on the highlights of that for you
All right. Good afternoon. Nikki Johnson. Nikki Johnson, Regional Economist here at the PDC. So I'm here today to present some highlights of our 2024 Hampton Roads Regional Benchmarking Study. It's going to be released at the end of this month. So the Regional Benchmarking Study is a comprehensive annual analysis where we benchmark the region's economic performance across a variety of indicators for 10 topics that we feel shape the Hampton Roads region best. The introduction section is also going to include locality data profiles for each of our member jurisdictions. And then the local comparison section at the bottom, we're going to compare the localities for selected indicators that we feature throughout the study. And then the rest of the study is focused on benchmarking the region's performance across those 10 topics, ranges from economy to education. The overall goal of the study is to help to inform both the board, public, policymakers in general, and also to aid in our strategic planning efforts. And so for each indicator, you're going to see that we track the latest trends within the region. And then we also benchmark the region's performance where the data is available to 18 similar sized metro areas. We also make sure to provide context with our data, which we think is very important. So with every chart that you see within this study, you're going to see 2 descriptions of why it's important and how are we doing within the latest trends. So I just want to provide some highlights from the study. This is definitely not comprehensive, just to show you what we've looked at. So in the economy section, obviously we're going to cover civilian jobs, which we saw made a full recovery in 2023. So we recovered all of the jobs that we lost during the pandemic. And if you compare the level of jobs in the region from 2019 to 2023, we're up about 1.2%. So that ranks us near the bottom half of our reference MSAs. If you look at where the largest growth is occurring, we can see it's in metro areas that are in the south and out west. And that should be no surprise if we understand that that's also where a lot of the population growth is occurring over the last few years. And so here we see those demographic changes. In Hampton Roads, we saw a nice rebound in the population in 2023, which is welcome news after we lost residents in the prior year. That's largely due to the surge in COVID deaths and decrease or increase of domestic outmigration during that period. So positive rebound, but you see we're still well below those pre-pandemic levels. If we compare the average annual population growth in the region between 2020 and 2023 to those reference MSAs, it puts us roughly in the middle of the pack, which is positive and relatively where we were if you look at the prior year's estimates. Now, we also have 3 sections that are devoted to the 3 main pillars of the Hampton Roads economy: defense, port, and tourism. And so here we're looking at the tourism industry, and we are examining the trends in leisure and hospitality wages for workers in the region. And so this graph on the left, this is adjusted for inflation. We see that that tight labor market in the aftermath of the pandemic really pushed up wages for workers in leisure hospitality industry. And then on the right, we look at the average weekly wage for leisure and hospitality workers in 2023, and that is adjusted for differences in cost of living across those metro areas. So we rank near the bottom. However, this is a slight improvement from the prior year. So we moved up a little bit, but still definitely not where we want to be in order to remain competitive and attract residents to the region. So our housing section, we look at a variety of indicators from permits to prices to affordability. So this looks at the latest trends in housing affordability within the region. We know that affordability deteriorated during the pandemic with the surge in housing prices. And so we see that the percentage of households that are spending 30% or more of their income on housing increased dramatically since 2020. This is especially true among renters, which is that blue line that you see there. So it's saying that more than half of all renters in Hampton Roads are spending 30% or more of their income on housing. which is how we define cost burden. However, for 2023, there is a slight improvement. If you see that little nick on the bottom there, we saw a slight decline, and that really tracks with what we've seen in housing prices over the last year and a half. There has been slight slowdown from that accelerated pace that we were experiencing in the first few years after the pandemic. But if we compare the percentage of households spending 30% or more of their income on housing to our reference MSAs, we are second from the bottom, right? And as we all know, affordability is an issue here in the region. This is also a slight improvement. So we were last from the bottom in the earlier estimates, and so we've moved up one. A new section that's in this year's benchmarking study is inclusive growth and racial equity. And so here we're really aiming to look at how the region has fared in terms of equitable growth across different social strata. And so the chart on the left, we're looking at how the unemployment rates have recovered across different racial and ethnic groups between 2019 and the latest estimates for that time, which was 2022. Now, the gap, so the Black unemployment gap, is 4 percentage points higher in the region relative to the white unemployment rate. And so that gap of 4 percentage points, it actually puts us, it's relatively lower to our reference MSAs. And so majority of our comparison metros have a relatively higher Black-white unemployment rate gap. And then finally, we also look at transportation. So commuting, as we all know, is very important here in the region. Given the unique local government structure in Virginia, we have one of the highest rates of workers that travel outside of their county to go to work every day. If we looked at all of the more than 300 MSAs, Hampton Roads ranks 9th. Compared to our reference areas, we're second beyond just Richmond. There hasn't been much change in terms of the distribution of workers, either working inside of their county, outside, or to a neighboring state. This compares the 5-year ACS 2017 and 2022 estimates. However, this does not include those workers who are working from home, just commuting. So if we were to include those, we would see some shifts since the pandemic. So this is just a very short overview of a few indicators. It's a much larger study, but our whole goal is really to show areas for improvement in the region and also where are our strengths. If you have any questions, as I said, this will be available on our website at the end of the month, but if you want a print copy, please reach out to me and let me know. We'll send it out.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. A lot of good information in there. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
A lot of good information. Of course, she just about answered what I was going to ask, and that it is on the website. And because there were so many things that were covered in the report, which was excellently done, and having been a member of the TPO, we just did a lot of talking about transportation and funding and all of that. And your report backs up some of the concerns that were expressed in the TPO meeting. So we could do it on the website, but if there's any way that we could possibly get a hard copy, I truly would appreciate it. It's good being on the website, but you know, if you try to download it or take the time to read it all on the website, sometimes it gets a little taxing unless you have a lot of time and a lot. But if we could, that would really be great. And the other thing is, if any of this locally, is there any, I know it's Hampton Roads, but are cities broken down anyway in your study?
Yeah, so our last chapter is the local comparison, where we don't track all of the indicators just because it would be too much, but we take some of the selected indicators that we track across the different topics, and we just compare across localities within the region. So there is that local comparison. I will make sure that we get you a printed copy, but if anybody else wants them at our next board meeting, we will make sure to also have printed copies here available. Just let me know.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. Since we don't meet in December, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ward. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next is strategic plan for Hampton Roads. Mr. Crum, you want to introduce Mr. Wahlberg?
Yes, Eric Wahlberg is your principal that leads our regional planning department, and he's going to be joined by To Tran to talk about a framework and approach for how we propose to update a regional strategic plan for Hampton Roads. So no approval needed today, but very much looking for your input on this proposed approach. So Eric.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon, everybody. So, as Nikki just kind of laid out, I think we've got a really interesting mix of both opportunities and challenges here in Hampton Roads. You know, kind of on the opportunity side of the ledger, we've got the economic foundation provided by the federal presence in the region. We've got a thriving port and tourism industry, and we've got growing wind energy and manufacturing sectors. On the challenges side, you know, we're taking advantage of those opportunities. We're going to need to deal with some of the housing issues, both affordability and availability that Nikki pointed to. We've got out-migration concerns, and we've got the issues that Ben highlighted in flooding and sea level rise. I think the good news on this is that we're really making headway on regional cooperation. I think that, you know, as many of you know, I worked for the PDC back in the day. I've been away for 10 years. I'm back here now, and I think there's been some real advances in regional dialogue and regional cooperation. But I think taking that to the next level is going to require some real focus, and I think the strategic planning process is a real opportunity for that. All right, so a couple of pictures here from our July PDC and TPO meetings. As many of you will remember, because I think most of you participated in it, we changed things up and had a very different format at those meetings. At the PDC meeting, we invited in young professionals to talk about regional attractiveness and talk about out-migration concerns. Those are the pictures up at the top. The TPO meeting was sort of a roll up your sleeves opportunity to mark up maps and talk about the future of transportation in the region. And I really see this as a model as how we might move things forward on the strategic plan. All right, so as you're probably familiar, the Code of Virginia calls on PDCs to create regional strategic plans. They're meant for guidance of the regions that we serve. The plans are meant to apply primarily to regional issues, not local issues, those issues that impact multiple localities. And the code also calls for identifying goals, objectives, and strategies along with that effort. And that really fits with what we've got in mind for this initiative. All right, so a few guidelines before we get into some of the details on this. So first of all, the regional strategic plan will not impinge on local land use authority. You know, as Ben mentioned earlier, you know, the PDC doesn't have that authority anyway, and just, you know, we want to, you know, everybody to rest assured that this will be at the regional level and won't really delve into those issues where local land use authority lies. The plan will leverage and not replace pre-existing plans and initiatives. You know, there's so much going on in the region, and part of the method to the madness here is to look across all that and to try to identify both areas of reinforcement and some gaps that might occur across all that. But we're really trying to leverage all that work. And then finally, just to reemphasize the point that we're really going to try to focus on areas where enhanced regional coordination can bring some benefits. So this is, you know, we're going to cast a broad net at the beginning of the process, but I think you can think of it as being sort of funnel shaped. And as we proceed, we're going to have to be sort of hard-nosed about prioritizing. And when we get to the end of the process, we're going to draw it down to a set of issues that really rise to the top in terms of regional focus and priority. Okay, in terms of plan development process, the first pillar in this is going to be evaluation of current status. And again, to tie it back to the benchmarking work that Nikki just laid out, that's a great example of pre-existing work that really will help to support this. Now we're going to have to augment that and build it out in some other areas. So that's going to be part and parcel of this first section of the work. We're also going to be looking across many regional, local, and state level plans, looking at touch points where there are common elements there, also trying to search out gaps and whatnot. All that information will then serve as input to a stakeholder engagement process. And coming out of that, we're going to identify a set of regional metrics. Next are two parallel tracks in two different focus areas. The first is focused on improvement of quality of life for our current residents. The metrics that are identified in the first pillar will serve as an input for a stakeholder engagement process with the goal of identifying a set of regional goals. And eventually, with that idea of a funnel and being kind of hard-nosed about prioritization, eventually getting to a subset of issues where we develop action plans. Running along in parallel with that is going to be another pillar that's focused on regional competitiveness. Now, this will be the area with the strongest link to the comprehensive economic development strategy that already exists in the region. As you know, there are many different groups working on economic development. Those economic development plans consistently point back, though, to a plan, a set of regional issues where the PDC sort of is the primary organization to try to move those things forward. And so the process here is going to be similar to what I laid out previously in that second pillar, but with a different stakeholder group and a different set of issues. All right, next up, I'm going to pass it over to our new senior regional planner, To Tran, and To is going to talk a little bit more about the structure. So, To.
Thank you, Eric. So before we go into the detail of the framework for our strategic plan, I would like to highlight some of the approach that we use. First of all, the principle when we go into this kind of practice is we do like think globally, plan regionally, and act locally in order to create this framework. And one of the several reference we use to conduct study and as well as propose the framework is based on the publication. It could be come from the report, the guideline, or academic research. The other set of reference we use is best practice, mostly coming from the APA award. APA stands for American Planning Association, or the case studies that have been published by this organization. And as Eric mentioned before, that among two parallel track improving the quality of life, we put the Hampton Road resident at the center of the framework. At the same time, we all know that our migration issue have been appear in the region, and in order to improve that issue, we need to retain, not only retain the people living here, improve the quality of life for people here, but also attract more people coming in. The people, the group that we target is including the visitor, investor, and talent come and live here for the reason. And the framework contains 6 major topics. Underneath this topic, it's going to have multiple subtopics, and each of the topics have been designed and proposed based on 3 factors. The first one is the overall context of the region. It's been mentioned in the analysis, the report. The second group of data we use is the regional issue have been mentioned in the current plan or report. And the third one is the the PDC and the TPO work that have been fall into this kind of topic. So I'm going to go very quickly on the topic. Each of these, for example, in the economic topic, we're focusing on federal spending, innovation, and workforce. This coming from the different level of reference. The first one is state level. It's coming from the Go Virginia plan. At the regional level, it coming from the SET, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, and also it also coming from the Hampton Road Investment Playbook, which is the Hampton Road Alliance is working with Professor Bruce Card from Drexel University. The other set of reference coming from 757 Recovery and Resilient Action Plan. And those are some of the example of the plans that we based on to propose this indicator. With the next topic, which is visitor appeal, is including tourism and cultural capital. This kind of topic we use to coming from Virginia Outdoor Plan, Virginia Wildlife Plan. That is the state level tourism kind of topic plan. At the regional level, we haven't seen any kind of clear or plan of initiative on this, but we include different local plan in terms of visitor tourism industry. In settlement pattern, we categorize in three small group, including land, placemaking, and housing. This also coming from different reference at the state level, such as consolidated plan from the state level, as well as different city or locality consolidated plan that have published. The other topic that we mentioned is the resident well-being, including health, education, resiliency, and social equity and cohesion. And another big topic we're going to address in this framework is infrastructure, including transportation, energy, and broadband. And the final topic that the framework mentioned is about natural environment, including the natural environment quality, sea level rise, and flooding issues. So the framework is designed for several purposes. The first one is to review and comparison between the existing plan and initiative. The second purpose is to select the metric and indicator for identify the goals for the region. And the third one, it could be used to track the progress toward the goal that we established. And this is just an example of the outcome of the framework. As you can see, it can be laid out in different way. The radar in illustration here showing different way to measure different topic across the region. And this topic can be used to, like I mentioned, describe the status by indicator. It could be used to compare between our region with the other nearby region, or compare with the state in average. And also, again, this kind of output could be used to track the progress toward the goal to see where we are and how we move.
Great. Thank you, Ted. All righty, to wrap things up, I'll walk you through a timeline of what we've got in mind. So the three pillars here correspond to the slide that I showed earlier. So on task one, we're dealing with assessing current status. So we'll have evaluation of existing plans, identification of metrics, and then all that'll get rolled into a dashboard that will be up online on the PDC website as a way to provide that information to the public and to the stakeholders. And we hope to wrap that section of the work up by Q2 of 2025. Moving on to the two parallel tracks on quality of life and regional competitiveness, identification of goals by Q3 of 2025, and then development of action plans for a small subset there in Q4 of 2025. To give you an idea of what we've got in mind in terms of stakeholder engagement, a lot of the focus is going to be sort of at the professional level, if you will. So that's going to include staff here, of course, our board of both PDC and the TPO, involvement of locality staff, staff from regional agencies, CAOs, et cetera. And finally, as far as outputs are concerned, coming out of the first line of work, regional metrics, the synopses of the various plan evaluations and the dashboard that I spoke about earlier. And then coming out of the second two lines of work, that set of regional goals and action plans. So that's a brief overview of what we've got in mind, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Mr. Wahlberg, Mr. Tran, thank you very much for all the work, and certainly a lot of information in there. Looks like an aggressive timeline, but certainly looking forward to seeing it completed. Any questions or discussion from the board? Mr. Crum, any comments?
No, I think we heard great feedback from the structure that we had for those July meetings, where you had more of an opportunity to engage and have conversation. So one of the things we look forward to as Eric and Toe bring forward different topic areas, you can almost see the opportunity for us to use that meeting format to really unpack challenges and opportunities on these different topic components that would go into the strategic plan. So we look forward to engaging with you on this over the next new year.
Excellent. All right, why don't you walk us through the rest of the agenda?
I'll just be short to say that you have your committee minutes and summaries, some information for the commission members to take a look at as an FYI. As a reminder, we do not meet in December, so happy holidays to everyone. We will be back at the third Thursday in January, and it's hard to believe that General Assembly will be started by the time we meet again in January. So I look forward to engaging with you at that point. Obviously, we'll be bringing back the design standards that Ben briefed you on today, looking for action. But sir, that's all we have for you today. I believe Vice
Chair, if I may have the floor for a minute. I'd like to give a congratulations to my good friend, Mayor Donnie Tuck. When I came onto this board, Donnie kind of took me under his wing. We traveled a number of different places together all over the United States as mayors and outside of the United States. And one thing I can say about you, sir, you've always demonstrated the highest level of integrity and given me a real good framework to work from. Most importantly, you have shown me how to be a professional. And I want to thank you in front of this body for not only your leadership, for your guidance, love, care, and concern. We'll still be hanging out together from time to time, but I did want to say that on your behalf. And in the Navy, of course, when you retire, we say we wish you fair winds and following seas. So I will say that at this time, sir. I wish you fair winds and following seas.
If you don't mind, thank you. I just want to just express my gratitude and I think joy at being a part of this body. And thank you for your forbearance and patience with me. I've been reflecting and about my journey as being a part of this board. And none of you know, with the exception of Brian DeProfio, who used to brief me maybe 1 or 2 days before this body would meet. And we did that probably for maybe 6 months, where he would take your agenda and he would go through it and tell me the things I need to be concerned about. And then he did a cheat sheet for me about the issues that were coming up and things. And so to have actually led this body for maybe 3 years was something beyond my expectations. And I'm happy. Overjoyed, thankful for all the membership, and some of you I've got a chance to know, and some just in passing conversations. But I just think that we've done tremendous things for our community. I think there are better things ahead for us, and I'm just again thankful and wish you all the best. And I'm very appreciative of the friendships and relationships I've been able to establish in this past 8.5 years. So thank you very much. Have a great holiday and a great upcoming new year. And I also will say that Mayor-elect Jimmy Gray will be, I think you'll all be very, very pleased and happy with him as, I won't say my replacement, but as the new person for the city of Hampton.
There is no replacement for you, Mayor Tuck, and thank you for being an example of how to conduct yourself as an elected official. And so just want to also express my gratitude and appreciation for that, all that you've done for the region, for this board, and certainly for Hampton. So thank you. We are adjourned.